All right, I'll ask you.
Okay, hi, I'm Isaac Raya, and this is Amelie Sherry, and we're doing a interview based upon what are we doing?
So it's an interview for my course about classroom goals and reward structures and seeing how that looks in the classroom.
Okay.
Yeah, sweet. So the first question is, what activities do you have students do in which their ability to complete the activity or attain the goal of the activity is unrelated to whether other students complete it?
So in class, I normally do these types of activities that are not related to a grade structure, and those just for example, two things that I do, or one of them is we do class debates, and not everyone has to participate. They have to be present, and they have to be able to answer questions while the debate is going on. But they don't have to actually debate another student to be able to get the benefits of what's happening in the debate. So some students are able to speak, and they really want to speak, and they want to argue with other students, and maybe even argue with the teacher. And some other students don't want to do that, but they really do like being in the debate and listening to the other students talk to each other. The other thing that I do is vocabulary competitions. I'll split the class in half, and I'll go through the terms that we have for that unit, and I'll give definitions to half the class, and the half class will blurt out the answers, so that not every student is blurting out, but they're listening. And then the other half will compete against that half to see how many vocabulary terms that they can get within a range of time. And I think that that's I know that's what I do for students to be able to complete, some type of mental activity, while other students are they don't necessarily have to do that. It's not that they're not learning, because they are learning, and I find that when we do those types of activities and I assess all the students later, it's much better that I've done that activity than not for all those students, because their level of understanding is much higher afterwards.
How frequently do you do those activities and competitions?
Good question. I try to do them 2 or 3 times per unit.
Okay.
And sometimes they're at the very beginning of the unit. Sometimes at the very end of the unit. Sometimes they're at the middle. It all depends. And then also, it depends upon how the class is feeling that day. If they're a little lethargic, then I usually do that kind of stuff with them. And the reason why is because they kind of get charged up by a class debate or a vocab competition.
Great. Thank you. So the second one is, what activities do you have students do in which their ability to complete the activity or attain the goal of the activity depends on other students not completing it or attaining the goal?
So the vocab competition is one of them. And there's a couple different ways that I do the vocab competition. I've already talked about splitting up the class in half. I also do an individual tournament. The rest of the class is quiet, and students will battle each other one-on-one to try to see who knows the most vocabulary terminology. Another thing that I do is textile factory simulation, and I split the class into 3. And what they do is they manufacture these small paper shirts with bow ties and cufflinks and stuff. And the goal of this is to understand what the working conditions were for women and families in northeastern United States during the times of the Industrial Revolution. And if the class doesn't finish, that's fine. It doesn't really matter, but they are dependent upon their teammates to be able to complete all the tasks in order for them to win.
Right. Great. What activities do you have students do in which they must work together so that one student's ability to complete the activity and attain the goal depends on other students? completing it, which I'm sure one example would be what you said, the textile.
Yes, and the vocab competition where they're in like half the classes together. The textile factory. These are all collaboration projects. So like I do a newspaper where kids are responsible for different articles and maps and illustrations and things like that. And there's a time limit, and they all have to work together in order to be able to complete it. They also produce in my class videos, and they're always partnered up with another student. And in order for them to complete the video, they have to work together,
Sure.
developing a script and making illustrations and acting. There's lots of collaborative activities that we do in my class, but those are just some of them.
Awesome. So in what ways do you reward students so that one student's reward is unrelated to the rewards of others, so more individual?
So this is an interesting question. I got to say that I meet the needs of my students individually throughout the school year. I kind of assess, and it's just based upon need, what that particular student needs. If it's time with me, if it's more time on projects, if it's like preferential seating or like materials or whatever it is, I try to meet those needs. And I think that's partially the answer to that question. I also give end of the year awards to students, and I don't think that the students know that they're working towards those awards, but I give those awards to students that I think that would benefit most from getting an award. They're not necessarily your standard award like most valuable student or anything like that. Sometimes they're like most artistic or most contemplative student. I think that helps.
Great. In what ways do you reward students so that one student's reward depends on another student not receiving an award? So more of a competitive aspect to this.
I don't think I do that unless it's a vocab competition.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then lastly, in what ways do you reward students so that one student's reward hinges on whether other students also receive a award?
We were talking about this a little bit earlier, and I think that I do this when my class gets a little bit out of control, and they're not doing the things that they're supposed to be doing in class, like completing classwork on time and exiting the door without doing assignments or learning some of the materials that we have. And so there are students that they will always finish the assignment, whatever that is. Or they'll always demonstrate that they've learned something. But sometimes that group is a minority, and in order for the class to really function in the weeks that we have in the unit, I need the majority, if not all the students, to complete the work or understand the assignment. So that's when this is really a penalty to the kids that would normally do the work. All the other kids will have to complete the work in order for everyone to be able to leave the class. So I think that's the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one final question. What role do grades play in your class? How do you use that? Do you use grading to leverage students to get them to do things? Do you allow that to be part of the competition, or what is your focus when it comes to grades and announcing that? And
so
using that to
students,
motivate students?
I don't think students are aware of like the other grades,
Okay.
unless it's like a group project and they're being graded right then and there. And as far as like leverage, sometimes grading works for like getting them to do things for you, but I think in general, the learning has to be intrinsic. Like there's got to be some type of other motivation besides a grade.
Great.
And that's kind of speaks to a lot of things in our society too. It's like, you don't always get the best. You don't always derive happiness or something out of like money.
Sure.
So it's the same thing for grading. Does grading help students be able to learn the
Right.
content? Yes, sometimes it does, but by and large, it does not.
Right.
So my grading system is not doesn't reflect. It's not really based upon students learning things.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Great. Well, those are all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Ryder.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sherry.